So good evening, Singapore. Good evening. My name is Peter Morgan, and I spent 33 years in the trenches as a steely-eyed Oriental crime fighter with the Hong Kong police. And tonight I'm going to share with you 3 lessons that I learned, which I believe were the secret of my success, not just at work, but also in life. Now, I know what you're all thinking. Typical policeman la, spent 33 years and only managed to learn 3 things. That's what? 1 thing every 11 years? Well, actually, you're wrong. I learned a lot more than 3 things. I actually learned 5 things. But we don't have enough time to go through all of them tonight. So lesson number 1. Imagine for a second that you've just finished 9 months at the police training academy. Very arduous training, very demanding. But now you're out on the streets of Hong Kong for the first time in uniform. Now, has anybody been to Hong Kong? Quite a lot of you, right? So I'm sure you've heard of Hollywood Road, and I'm sure you've heard of the Man Mo Temple. Well, on this occasion, that's where I was patrolling by myself when suddenly I heard a commotion. So, of course, I immediately went to investigate, and I saw a big black dog snarling and growling at the public. And it had foam and froth all over its mouth. So I thought, oh my goodness, this is a dog that's got rabies. And in Hong Kong in the 80s, rabies was certainly a big problem. And you don't want to catch rabies because if you get it, it's a very unpleasant series of inoculations into your stomach with duck embryo. No fun at all. So I wanted to make sure the public were properly safeguarded. And the other thing I remember from my academy days was, if you suspect there's a dog with rabies, you are authorized to shoot it. So I want to stop for a second and apologize to all the dog lovers in the audience. Unfortunately, public safety does come before dogs. And I was authorized to shoot that dog if I thought it was going to threaten the public. One thing I did remember from my notes at the college was that you have to shoot it anywhere except the brain, because unfortunately they need the brain so they can do an autopsy to confirm if it's got rabies or not. So I immediately pulled my gun out and I thought, how great is this, right? I've only been out of the academy 1 week and I've already got a chance to shoot something and I've got a chance to pull my gun out. So I was quite happy with that. But of course, the main focus was to keep the public safe. So I was keeping them all back with my gun out, following the dog. And I thought to myself, well, I've been out of the academy for 1 week. If I shoot this dog now, I can't imagine the amount of paperwork that's going to generate. And my bosses are not going to be very happy. So I was a bit cautious about how quickly I should shoot that dog. So I followed it for a bit longer. And the dog walked off, and I followed it, and I saw it going towards an old man who lived in a small wooden hut on Ladder Street next to the temple. And I thought, this is it. He's going to bite that man, and I'm going to have to shoot it. And my only concern was that I didn't shoot the old guy as well, because that would have been even more embarrassing. And the dog went up to the old guy, and there was a bowl of water, and the dog started licking from that bowl of water. And it turns out the man had been shaving, and it was his dog. So all the foam and the froth that I thought was rabies was actually shaving foam from this guy who was shaving. So I thought, I'm so glad that I didn't shoot that dog right now, because I would have spent the whole career behind the desk doing paperwork for sure. So I discreetly put my gun away and carried on patrol, whistling a tune as I went. So the first lesson I learned in my first week was a very simple one. Look before you leap. Or in the business world, maybe do your due diligence first. Because by not doing radical action at that particular point, I saved myself from a world of hurt afterwards. So the first lesson is what? Look before you leap. Very good. So the second lesson that I want to share was when I was a hostage negotiator. And I was one of the last few British hostage negotiators in the Hong Kong police. And on one occasion, we had a British male who had a history of mental health problems and a history of drug abuse, who decided to take his girlfriend hostage with a knife and threaten to kill her and himself. So, of course, they called me straight away. Some of you may know Hong Kong. I used to live in Discovery Bay, and it's quite a long way to get into town. You have to take a ferry, and it takes at least half an hour. So I contacted the police at the scene, and I said, start talking to the guy, try to calm him down, find out what the problem is, and I'll take over the negotiations when I arrive. So I immediately swam over. I took the ferry to get to him, and I arrived pretty quick, actually, within 30 minutes. So when I got there, I was shocked. I was completely surprised, because nobody was doing anything. They were all sat down, having their lunchbox, waiting for me to turn up. No one had said anything to him. So I said, right, okay, I'll start the negotiations. Typically, I would wait for someone else to join me to do the negotiations, because it's better with 2 people. But we'd wasted 30 minutes already, so I decided we'd better start immediately. And at this point, his psychologist had arrived, and he says, whatever you do when you speak to him, do not tell him you're police, because he hates the police. And he will not want to talk to you if you tell him you're police. I said, well, unfortunately, that's not possible. One of the things that the negotiators always insist on is that we tell the truth. Because if you don't, and they find out, then it breaks all your trust, and it breaks all the rapport that you've built up, and they will not believe whatever you say afterwards. So I was insistent on saying I was in the police, and I would deal with any problems that arose because of his reaction to it. So what we then do is you knock on the door and you say, hello, my name's Peter, I'm from the police, and I'm here to help you. And that's really true. We really are there to help everybody if we can, and to get everybody out alive. So I knocked on the door, and I said, hello, my name's Peter, I'm from the police. And then I said, why don't you put the knife down and come out so we can talk? And he went, okay. So I was a bit shocked. Normally I'm not lost for words, and I was about to say, no, we have to negotiate for a little bit longer. We've got people here watching what's going on. So can we just carry on talking? No, he decided to put the knife down and come straight out. So of course, everybody around was going, wow, this guy's good, right? We just turned up. 30 seconds later, the guy surrendered. We should call him for everything. And we won't have to hang around to these incidents for very long. So that was very interesting, and it gave me my second lesson. And my second lesson was, ask and you shall receive. Or maybe ask and maybe hopefully you will receive. But that was the lesson I got from that one. And it's true, because today I came tonight and some of the speakers asked me, why am I going first? And I said, I asked Jit if I could go first. And he let me go first. Thanks very much, Jit. So it works. So remember, ask and you shall receive. What's lesson number 2? Ask and you shall receive. Okay, you're a fast learning group, right? Very good. So lesson number 3. Again, a hostage situation. And on this occasion, we had a 60-year-old male with a history of mental health problems. And he had schizophrenia, and he had medication, which he stopped taking. And because of that, suddenly, he had a relapse. So he was at home with his aged mother, who was about 84. He picked up a knife and chased his mother, threatening to kill her. Luckily, she could still run at 84, even with the Zimmer frame. And she ran into the bathroom, locked herself in, and called the police. So we immediately rushed to the scene, and we wanted to start negotiating with this guy. But when we arrived, we found that he was in a fetal position right next to the door with the knife at his throat. So we knew that if we tried to burst through the door for whatever reason, if we decided to go tactical later, he would be killed because the knife would go straight into his throat. So the main objective then was to negotiate as long as we could to try and get him to surrender and come back and give the knife back. Unfortunately, he didn't respond to us. So at this particular point, we had a clinical psychologist who was part of our team, and we asked them for their advice. And they said, well, I'm a bit concerned about the elderly mother in the toilet. In fact, she was fine. She had a newspaper. She was reading that, and she was quite happy. And we're quite concerned that he's going to get worse because he hasn't got his medication. We've got to get him for treatment as soon as possible. So I think we should go tactical. Now, for me, going tactical was not an option because we couldn't go through the door, because that guy would be killed for sure. The only other option was to go to the rooftop, abseil down, and climb through the window. And I wasn't doing that because we were 34 floors up. So that was going to be pretty dangerous, I can tell you. So at this particular point, one of my team members found his uncle living nearby. And apparently they get on really well together. So what happened was that we spoke to the uncle and said, we need you to speak to this guy, try and convince him to come out. So we briefed him what to say. He went to the door, knocked on the door, and he said, hi, this is your uncle. We're about to have a game of Mahjong, but we only have 3 players. And we need someone to join us for the game. Why don't you put the knife and come out and join us for the game of Mahjong? So this guy recognized his uncle's voice. He really liked to play Mahjong. And he put the knife down and he came out and he surrendered. Situation resolved. So we always carry a Mahjong table in our negotiation response kit now, just in case. Because if it's a long case, we can always play ourselves as well. So that's quite a useful thing to have. So lesson number 3 for me, because we were told to do the tactical assault, and we did something very different, which worked much better and more peacefully. The third lesson for me was always think outside the box. So what's the third lesson? Okay, that was a little bit lackluster. So what I'm going to do now is give you the test, because I'm sure that will wake you up, right? So I'm going to go through all the lessons again very quickly. Lesson number 1. Very good. I think if you're not very fast with this, I'm going to make you do it twice. So lesson number 2. Okay, and lesson number 3? Okay, excellent. So At the end of the day, the 3 lessons are: you do not necessarily need to be confronting a rabid dog. You do not need to be necessarily facing a madman with an axe or a knife. You don't even need to be carrying a mahjong table around with you. But if you try to implement some of those lessons that I've shared today, I'm sure you'll find them very useful one way or the other in your daily life and maybe at work. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the evening. Thank you.